Hey guys, I hope you're well. If you don't know who I am, my name is Blakemore. I teach, travel and sometimes triumph. I usually make a range of teaching and traveling videos. I know that 80% of you are not yet subscribed, so if you're new to my channel, feel free to subscribe down in the corner and we'll get started with the video. So, the other day I asked you guys to think of a range of different questions for your NQT year. Questions for whether it's student teachers who are about to come on NQT or NQTs generally. So, I've got a book here full of different questions that you guys asked me, and within this video I'm going to answer some of those questions. Before I do that, I just want to talk about my NQT year. My NQT year was a bit of a baptism of fire in some ways. It was a fantastic year, but as soon as I entered my NQT year, I thought I'd been on this learning journey so far. I hit the NQT year and the learning curve went up like that. It was quite tough. I, up until that point, had only taught year 4. I was with a class of year 5, 6, 33 children in that class. Year 6s, there were lots of different special educational needs, English as an additional language children, and it was just one of those years where there was a steep learning curve, and as a result of that year, I learned quite a lot, but I also made a lot of mistakes. Now, I've made videos about my NQT year in the past, talking about my learning journey throughout the whole thing, and I think I've learned a lot from that experience, so I feel like it's fair for me to talk about my different experiences and also lessons that I learned within this video. So to start off with, I'm going to get into this book and look through some of the questions that you guys asked me. One of the biggest questions that I was asked from you guys is, what does the first day look like? And there were questions that were a bit like, what does the first day look like? What does the first week look like? And to be honest, it's quite straightforward. Now, all of the children will be moving to a new class, and ultimately as an NQT you will be some class's new teacher. You might be in a privileged position where you've come as a student teacher and you've transitioned into an NQT position in the same school, so you already know lots of things about the school that you're in. But for the majority, you might not. So to start off with, you've got to imagine what you are going to be like at a new school. Chances are you are going to be on your best behaviour. If you go down to the staff room, you're going to want to put on the best impression that you possibly can. As a result, if you imagine the children, they're also going to be in that similar position. So the majority of the time, touch wood, this table, the children are going to be on their best behaviour too. So some of the things that I would recommend for those first couple of days, mainly just relationships. One of the things I made a mistake with was going straight for the academics and going for that. Now, some schools stipulate that you've got to start with the academics, and that's fine, but also make sure that you're getting to know the children, because if you don't do that immediately, then it's going to make the learning process more difficult. If you don't have those positive relationships set up and the children don't like you as a teacher, then they're not going to want to learn from you. So try to be strict but fair, yes, but at the same time remember that you're there to have fun and develop relationships straight away. One of the other things I would say is get to know the school. Now that might be that you go and check out where certain things are. Make sure that you spend time in the staff room getting to know other members of staff. That's important too, because those members of staff are the people who will support you during those days that are a bit tougher, which I can guarantee that NQT year generally does have those tougher days. Now, it's important to gain relationships with staff at the same time, because you're going to want to go and see teachers teach to help you with your teaching. No teacher is perfect, and as a result, NQTs have this, as I said, steep learning curve. So make sure you develop those relationships so that when you want to approach teachers and say, oh, can I watch you teach, they're a bit more receptive to that, basically. At the same time, one of the biggest tips that I'll give you during that first week is don't expect to know everything. I mean, as a teacher of 4 years, I still don't know everything, and we'll get onto that, as that was another question, bearing tips in mind. Don't worry about not knowing everything, and no one expects you to know everything too during the first week, so make sure that you ask those questions, whether it's to the head teacher, to your mentors. Just ask those questions, because if you don't ask and you don't know something, your mentors might just presume that you do. It's not expected that you do know things like, for example, different policies. You might not know those policies. Don't be afraid to ask questions. No one expects you to know everything, especially during the first week. So let's jump on to the next question, and that's, how do I assess children? There's a range of different ways to assess children. You've generally got two specific ways. You've got formative assessment and you've got summative assessment. Formative assessment can take the form of many different strategies. You've got teacher assessment, that generally comes through general observation, questioning, looking through box, the dreaded marking, if your school is high into that. Then you've got things like peer assessment, where the children have a success criteria or something like that, and they look through a piece of work with another person and just see, well, have they got that right? It might be maths, where they look through each other's answers, have they got questions right? And then you go to self-assessment, where children look at their own piece of work and have that opportunity to reflect on that piece of work. That's the one, as a teacher, I sometimes struggle with. Giving children the opportunity to assess themselves is important, but sometimes as a teacher you also need to give that opportunity to reassess the work that they've self-assessed. For example, if you give out answers for spelling, children might assess their own spellings but then not quite mark their own questions right. So you still need to give yourselves that opportunity to look through those pieces of work, just in case there are misconceptions, so that you can still assess those and then address those misconceptions later on. What should be in an NQT folder? If I'm completely honest with you, I didn't really have an NQT folder. Claire, did you have an NQT folder?
I did, but I'll say very much depends on local authority.
Yeah.
Like mine, I didn't have anyone from a local authority come in and check mine. However, I do know other people who basically had to keep a full folder as if it was their.
Yeah, I was never expected.
Their teacher style, like full teacher style folders. I didn't know. Mine was mostly just my lesson observations.
I would say with an NQT folder that it comes down to your local education authority. My NQT folder was extremely scarce. Like, I had a few lesson plans in there, but over time, and as I got into my NQT year, that NQT folder gathered more and more dust on a shelf. I put my different observations in there, and I also put some reflections in there to start the year with, but as I gradually progressed through the NQT year, I found that I didn't really need one. Again, it does come down to your local education authority. They might stipulate that you need a very rigorous NQT folder, so I guess that would be a key question to ask your school. As and when you get into that NQT year, just ask the question to your mentor, like, what should my NQT folder look like? Some will be like, oh, don't worry too much about that, and some will be like, right, you need to have your observations, you need to have your planning, you need to have your reflections, you need to have evidence of marking, you need to have evidence of self-assessment, you need to have evidence of progress, SEND files, and lots of different things. And then some will just be like, yeah, don't worry too much about it. One of the questions I got asked is how to manage workload. Now, to be completely honest with you, workload completely comes down to your school. So if you are struggling with workload, make sure you talk to your school. At the same time, I've made a range of different videos on how to manage your workload. I'll link one of them up there. I would say just really try to make sure you're productive throughout the day. Make good use of the time that you have during your NQT year. One of the things I like to do is get into good habits. One of the good habits I had is trying not to take books home with me. I found that during one of the terms, I got into this really bad habit of not marking lots of books throughout the day, and as a result I would end up taking 2 sets of books home with me, and then I'd put them off for the night. I'll get right into it, and then I'd eventually maybe mark a class of books, so that's 33 books, and then eventually it'd be really late at night and I'd be going through these books, and I would have that sort of feeling of what's the point in me doing that. So I tried to be as productive as possible throughout the day, making sure that I marked books if I had lots of different marking bits to do throughout the day, so that if the children came back from lunchtime, they could do the marking that I've set them, so that they could have those targets. But then at the same time, at the end of the day, if I had bits of marking to do, I'd make sure I tried to get those done before then leaving. It was a really big weight lifted off my shoulder once I started to tackle that. So make sure you get into those good habits throughout your NQT year, and talk to people if you are struggling with workload. One of the questions I got asked was about Year 5-6 tips. Now, as a teacher who taught Year 5-6 in my NQT year, I feel like I'm quite well equipped to talk about that. Now, one of the things I do miss about being a Year 5-6 teacher, I'm a Year 3 teacher now, is that children of that age generally have really good sense of humour. So you get that banter within Year 5-6, and I would say play off that so that you can have fun with lessons. And yeah, I really miss that in some ways. At the same time, children of that age are quite savvy. They understand behaviour management, and it's really important that you're strict but fair. One of the best teachers I saw was my mentor, and the way that she was strict but fair was key, and really did sustain fantastic behaviour management throughout the year. They'll pick up on behaviour management consistencies way more than children in Key Stage 1 would. What essentials would you recommend to buy in your NQT year? Nothing. Literally nothing. There are some things that you might want to buy, but I've made another video on that. I'll link that up there. The key really is to wait until you start your NQT year and to sort of see what your school actually has. I mean, you might get your job and think, right, I'm going to go buy myself some teacher stickers, some personalised. Well, it really doesn't matter, but your school might also give you stickers. The key is you don't know what equipment and resources your school have put aside and prepared for you. So you don't want to go out and start buying electric sharpeners and guillotines and all those sorts of things if those things are already available at your school already, because I've done that before where I bought some foam dice, like packs of foam dice, and I think it cost me like £8 or something ridiculous. And then I came into school and noticed that during the maths order, someone had ordered a huge quantity of foam dice, and I ended up with a huge amount of foam dice, basically. So I've got a bunch of foam dice somewhere anyway. Just make sure that you have a discussion with school as to what resources they have put aside for you, and yeah, just make sure that you're looking around and seeing what you can use in school before buying your own things. You don't want to waste money, but you might want to buy yourself some personalised stickers and stamps. I've always found them useful in the past. What would be my top 10 tips for NQTs? Now, I could sit here and sprawl off a bunch of tips for NQTs, but it would make the duration of this video extremely long. And I want to save that for another one too, a nice short, snappy tips video for NQTs. So one tip that I would give you though is to not stress. The other tip, so 2 tips, is that you will never be a master teacher. If you always remember that you're going to be a learning teacher, then that's going to really serve you well in the future. I would say even now, just in my 4th year of teaching, I'm still developing different strategies as a teacher. If you accept that you're always going to be a trainee teacher in some way, like a student teacher, then you will eventually become a better teacher because you'll be more receptive of feedback. No teacher is perfect, I can guarantee you that, so please don't feel inadequate if you have things that you need to improve on. I think that's a real toxic trait of some teachers who think they are perfect but then can't accept feedback when they're given it. So yeah, always be remembering that that's not grammatically correct. Again, yeah, I'm not perfect. So remember that you're not perfect and always be receptive to feedback. Next question is, how do I use my NQT time productively? Now, during your NQT year, you get an extra half day of admin time. So you get your half day PPA time and your half day NQT time. During my NQT year, I just wasn't productive with it, to be completely honest. For the first half of the year, I just wasn't really productive with that time. So much so that I needed a bit of intervention so that I could be a bit more productive with that time, because I would spend a lot of time procrastinating. The staff room was right next to the little PPA room that we had, and tea was available, so I'd make tea and I'd start some planning, but then procrastinate and then look at like resource websites and be like, oh, this is a cool resource, but wouldn't actually get the tasks done that I needed to. So I would say have a task set for that NQT time. It might be that you just want to complete your planning. So it might be that you want to complete a week's maths planning and foundation lesson planning, something along those lines. But make sure that you have a task set that you are going to complete during that time. That way you can be a bit more productive. During that NQT time, I would say that you are blessed because you never have that time again. So make sure you take advantage of that time and go and see other teachers teach. That will really shape you as an NQT because you'll think, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. I'm going to use that in my next lesson. I like that resource that you've got on your interactive whiteboard or on your display. Actually, I like how you're using that display within the lesson and that the children are using. Lots of different ways that you can start to look at other teachers and adapt your teaching based on what you see. So make sure you can take that opportunity to go and see other teachers teach. So the next question is jobs, everything to do with jobs. Now, as an international teacher, I mainly specialise on making videos for teachers who want to work abroad. However, the advice that I give within those videos are somewhat useful for NQTs who might also be wanting to apply for those jobs. But I am going to really break down lots of different processes for getting NQT jobs. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled for those videos. I'm going to start off by looking at the initial process before you even start with the interview, sort of the writing your personal statement and your CV and that sort of setup process of going and looking around schools. So we're going to do a pre-interview video to start off with, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Next question is it best to teach in a school where there are more classes per year group or less classes per year group? Now, I've only really taught on a minimum of 2 form entry schools, so that means there's 2 classes per year group. I do have friends who have taught in 1 form entry schools, and they say that there is a high demand on workload. If you imagine you're planning everything, you've got to different types of planning, long-term, medium-term, short-term planning for everything. You're then doing all of your teaching for everything as you would anyway, but then you've also got all the marking. So there's a lot of workload that goes in for a 1 form entry, but I know that those people also like the control that they have over the curriculum. So there's those pros and cons there. Having taught in a 2 form entry, I really liked that closeness. So you've got that relationship with the other teacher so that you can have those discussions of what's going to be working best for our classes, essentially. So you can say, right, will this lesson work for our classes? Of course, you can then adapt those lessons, but you're more likely to have those decent discussions so that you can then talk about what's going to work for your classes. If you've then got 2 classes for year 5, 2 classes for year 6, then you can then double up and do the humanities lessons, and you can start to spread workload out that way. It does reduce the workload by having more classes per year group. One thing I will say, now I'm an international teacher, I do know of schools where there are 14 form entry year groups, so that is 14 classes per year group. I would say yes, there's a benefit where work is distributed, so one person can take the maths, another person can take the science, and that work's all distributed, but at the same time, the teaching styles of different teachers doesn't necessarily match your own. So then you then have to do a lot of adapting. I know a friend of mine who does an awful lot of adapting for each lesson, because a lot of the lessons that are brought forward in terms of planning don't necessarily match their teaching style, so then there's almost more workload there too, and it becomes a bit like working at a 1 form entry because you're adapting everything for your class. So there's pros and cons. I personally like 2 to 4 form entry, I would say. I'm now in a 6th form, and that works pretty well. I mean, 6th form entry school, not 6th form. So that works pretty well too. My last question is, can you do your NQT year abroad? To answer that question, yes, you can. I do know of people who have completed their NQT year abroad. Having said that though, after I've looked at tests multiple times for jobs myself, I've never seen an NQT job come up. Now, it might be because it's not advertised as an NQT job like it would be back in the UK. You would have to contact the schools to see whether they accept NQTs. I know personally my school doesn't prefer NQTs. They prefer teachers to have more experience because they're looking for teachers with more experience. But I suppose it depends on you. Personally, I would avoid being an NQT over here just because pay would be significantly lower, and areas such as Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, they're expensive places. So you've got to keep that in mind too. I also think you learn to appreciate international education more having come from a British school. So there's that contrast too. Personally, I would do a couple of years in the UK and then go for international teaching, but there is nothing stopping you from being an NQT here. You just have to contact the schools and appreciate there's less positions available internationally for NQTs. You've also got to appreciate that the pay will be lower because you are an NQT, and that might make it difficult for the plans that you want to have here internationally. But I'll leave that up to you. So that marks the end of the question and answers video. Gosh, it's been quite a long one. Hopefully you found something within this video informative in some way. As I said throughout the video, I've made lots of different videos for NQTs. I'll leave a link up there for the playlist so that you can click onto those videos. If you've not yet subscribed to the channel, feel free to do that. I know that 80% of the people who watch this channel are not yet subscribed, so please smash that subscribe button. And yeah, if you've not yet liked the video, feel free to do that too. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one, but for now, I'm out. Your NQT time is about half day. It is half day. What are you on about, Thomas Blakemore? Travel Triumph. Is this even on? Yeah, pathetic light. That is half a day. And you have your NQT More. No, let's leave that bit. Cut that bit, Thomas. Ah.